The Betrothed of Hollowfang. Briar Winter had always felt like something was missing, a part of her past lost in the cracks of forgotten history. But when she returned to Black Hollow, the feeling only deepened. The town watched her too closely. The air carried her name in whispers. And on the night of the blood moon, she found herself drawn to the old ruins where he was waiting. A man with golden eyes and a presence that made the world hold its breath. "You've finally come," he murmured, stepping forward. "Now you must reclaim what was stolen." Chapter 1. The Return to Black Hollow. The train rattled along the tracks, each clack a percussive beat against the rhythm of Briar Winter's anxious heart. She hadn't been back to Black Hollow in over 30 years, not since her parents had abruptly packed their lives into worn suitcases and fled, leaving behind the only home she'd ever known. She was 58 now, her auburn hair streaked with silver, the lines around her hazel eyes a testament to a life lived, if not always understood. The reason for her return was somber. The passing of her great-aunt Maeve, the last thread connecting her to this enigmatic town. Outside, the landscape blurred into a tapestry of greens and browns, the late afternoon sun casting long, melancholic shadows. Briar pressed her forehead against the cool glass, the vibration a faint echo of the tremor in her soul. She'd spent most of her adult life trying to outrun the feeling of incompleteness, a persistent ache that had followed her from city to city, job to job, relationship to nowhere really. Each attempt to build a life had crumbled, leaving her with the same hollow echo in her chest. Maeve's letter, received just a week before her death, had been the catalyst. It was cryptic, filled with the strange, almost archaic language that had always characterized the older woman's speech. "The time has come, Briar," it read, the ink thick and black, almost bleeding into the aged parchment. "The Hollowfang calls to its own. You must return, child, and reclaim what is rightfully yours. The shadows stir, and the past will not stay buried." Briar hadn't understood the words then, and she barely understood them now. Hollowfang? It sounded like something out of a Gothic novel. Yet, the urgency in Maeve's tone, the palpable sense of something more had drawn her back. She'd felt it in her bones, a primal pull she couldn't ignore. The train hissed to a stop, the sudden deceleration jolting her back to the present. Black Hollow. The station was small, almost quaint, with a faded wooden sign that seemed to creak in the gentle breeze. A single, elderly porter shuffled along the platform, his movements slow and deliberate. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a smell that instantly transported Briar back to her childhood, to days spent exploring the sprawling woods that surrounded the town. She stepped off the train, her legs feeling strangely unsteady. The platform was deserted, save for the porter, who eyed her with a curious, almost knowing gaze. He nodded slowly, his eyes, the color of faded denim, holding a depth of understanding that made Briar shiver. "Welcome back, Miss Winter," he said, his voice raspy with age. "Been a long time." Briar managed a weak smile. "It has," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He gestured with a gnarled hand towards a waiting taxi, an ancient, boxy vehicle that looked like it had seen better days. "Maeve arranged for this. Said you'd be needing it." Briar nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Even in death, Maeve was orchestrating things, pulling strings from beyond the grave. She climbed into the taxi, the musty scent of old leather filling her nostrils. The driver, a silent, burly man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to see right through her, started the engine, and they pulled away from the station, heading into the heart of Black Hollow. The town itself was unsettling. It was as if time had stood still. The houses were old, many of them Victorian in style, with intricate carvings and darkened windows that seemed to watch her as she passed. There was a stillness to the air, a hush that felt both expectant and oppressive. People stopped on the sidewalks, their gazes lingering on the taxi, their expressions unreadable. It was a palpable sense of being observed, judged, perhaps even feared. They drove past the town square, dominated by a towering oak tree, its branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of some ancient beast. A wrought iron fence surrounded the tree, and Briar could have sworn she saw shadows flickering within its depths, even in the fading daylight. She remembered playing near that tree as a child, Maeve always warning her to stay away, her voice hushed with a fear Briar hadn't understood then. The taxi finally pulled up in front of a large, imposing house on the outskirts of town. It was Maeve's house, Briar realized, her heart pounding in her chest. It was even grander than she remembered, a 3-story Victorian mansion with a wraparound porch and a turret that reached towards the sky like a skeletal finger. The paint was peeling, the gardens overgrown, but there was a faded grandeur to it, a sense of history and secrets buried within its walls. The driver got out and opened her door, his silence adding to the growing unease that was settling over Briar. She stepped out, her legs feeling heavy, as if rooted to the ground. The house loomed before her, dark and silent, a physical manifestation of the mystery she had returned to unravel. As she stood there, gazing up at the house, a gust of wind swept through the overgrown garden, rustling the leaves of the ancient trees that surrounded the property. And in that wind, she heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, carrying her name. Briar, it seemed to come from the house itself, from the very stones and timbers, a call that resonated deep within her soul. She took a hesitant step forward, the key to the house, sent to her with Maeve's final effects, clutched tightly in her hand. It was cold, heavy, made of a dark metal she couldn't identify. It felt ancient, imbued with a power she couldn't comprehend. This key felt like it was unlocking something far greater, something far more terrifying. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Wind. The heavy front door creaked open with a mournful groan, the sound echoing through the silent house. Dust motes danced in the fading light that filtered through the stained glass windows, illuminating a cavernous hallway filled with shadows. The air was thick with a scent of old wood, beeswax, and something subtly floral, yet with an underlying metallic tang that made the hairs on Briar's arms stand on end. She stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a resounding thud that seemed to seal her fate. The silence was immediate, profound, broken only by the frantic beating of her own heart. She stood for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the gloom, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched, of being enveloped by something ancient and powerful. The house was a time capsule. Heavy, velvet curtains draped the windows, blocking out most of the remaining daylight. Antique furniture, shrouded in dust sheets, lined the walls, their shapes ghostly and indistinct. Family portraits, their faces obscured by shadow and age, stared down from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. Briar moved slowly through the house, her footsteps echoing on the creaking floorboards. She found the parlor, a large, opulent room dominated by a massive fireplace, its mantelpiece adorned with intricate carvings of wolves, and were those fangs? The furniture here was uncovered, arranged as if awaiting guests who would never arrive. A thick layer of dust coated everything, but Briar could still sense the lingering presence of Maeve, the faint scent of her lavender perfume clinging to the air. She ran a hand over the back of a velvet armchair, the fabric worn and faded, but still soft to the touch. A wave of sadness washed over her, a deep sense of loss for the woman who had been her only family, the woman who had held the key to her past. As dusk deepened, the house seemed to come alive. Shadows stretched and danced, playing tricks on her eyes. She heard whispers, faint murmurs that seemed to weave through the air, carrying snatches of words she couldn't quite decipher. Hollowfang airblood, the whispers seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, a constant, unsettling presence that made her skin crawl. She found a dusty, old oil lamp on a side table, and after several attempts, managed to light it. The flickering flame cast a warm, if unsteady, glow, pushing back the shadows, if only slightly. The light revealed more details of the room. A bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes, their titles obscured by dust, a writing desk, its surface cluttered with papers and dried inkwells, and a large, ornate mirror hanging above the fireplace, its surface clouded with age. Briar approached the mirror, drawn by an unseen force. As she looked at her reflection, she saw not only her own tired, anxious face, but also something else, a flicker of movement in the shadows behind her, a fleeting glimpse of something or someone watching her. She whirled around, her heart pounding, but the room was empty. She told herself it was just her imagination, the stress of the journey, the unsettling atmosphere of the house. But the feeling of being watched persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. She decided to explore the upstairs. The grand staircase creaked ominously under her weight, each step a protest against her intrusion. The upstairs hallway was even darker than the one below, the air colder, heavier. She passed several closed doors, each one a mystery, a potential gateway to the secrets of her past. She finally reached the master bedroom, Maeve's room. The door was slightly ajar, and Briar hesitated before pushing it open. The room was large and airy, with tall windows that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding woods. A four-poster bed, draped in heavy, embroidered fabrics, dominated the room. A dressing table, its surface cluttered with antique bottles and brushes, stood against one wall. And on the bed, laid out as if awaiting its occupant, was a dress. It was made of a deep crimson velvet, its bodice embroidered with intricate silver thread. It was old, clearly, but exquisitely preserved, as if waiting for this very moment. Briar felt a strange compulsion to touch it, to run her fingers over the soft fabric. As she reached out, she heard the whispers again, louder this time, more insistent. "Wear it, claim it yours," she recoiled, her hand trembling. The dress seemed to pulsate with a hidden energy, a power that both attracted and terrified her. She backed away, shaking her head, trying to clear the fog that was clouding her mind. She needed air. She needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. She turned and fled, running back down the stairs, through the hallway, and out the front door, gasping for breath as she stumbled onto the overgrown porch. The night air was cool and crisp, a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the house. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, eerie shadows across the lawn. Briar leaned against a porch pillar, her heart still racing, trying to regain her composure. And then she saw him. Standing at the edge of the woods, bathed in the pale moonlight, was a man. He was tall and lean, his figure silhouetted against the dark trees. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she could feel his gaze, intense and unwavering, fixed on her. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence radiated a power that made the air crackle with energy. He was more than just a man, and he was waiting for her. The whispers returned, a chorus inside her head. But this time she understood a sliver more. Heir of the Hollowfang. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else, a strange, undeniable pull, a feeling of recognition, of destiny. Chapter 3. The Blood Moon's Call. The man remained motionless, a statue carved from shadow and moonlight. Briar's breath hitched in her throat, a mixture of fear and a strange, unsettling familiarity swirling within her. He was an enigma, a figure seemingly conjured from the very essence of Black Hollow's mysteries. The air around him shimmered, a subtle distortion of the night that hinted at something other. She wanted to run, to hide, to barricade herself back inside the suffocating safety of Maeve's house. But her feet felt rooted to the spot, her gaze locked with his unseen eyes across the distance. The whispers in her mind had subsided, replaced by a low, humming resonance that vibrated through her very bones. It was the same resonance she'd felt from the crimson dress, from the house itself, from the very soil of Black Hollow. Slowly, deliberately, he raised a hand, a gesture that was both an invitation and a command. It was an unspoken summons, a call that echoed the words in Maeve's letter, the whispers in the wind, the very essence of her return. The Hollowfang calls to its own. Briar found herself moving, her legs acting of their own accord, carrying her down the porch steps and across the overgrown lawn towards the woods, towards him. The grass was damp beneath her feet, the night air cool against her skin. The moon, now higher in the sky, seemed to pulse with a faint, reddish glow. She hadn't realized it before, but tonight was the blood moon, a rare celestial event that Maeve had always spoken of with a mixture of reverence and dread. As she drew closer, she could see him more clearly. He was strikingly handsome, with sharp, angular features, high cheekbones, and a strong jawline. His hair was dark, almost black, falling to his shoulders in thick waves. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, eyes that glowed with an inner light, the color of molten gold, shifting and swirling like liquid fire. They were not human eyes. He lowered his hand as she approached, a faint smile playing on his lips. It was a smile that held both warmth and a hint of something dangerous, something predatory. The air around him crackled with an energy that made her skin tingle, a palpable force that both terrified and exhilarated her. "You've finally come," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air. It was a voice that spoke of ancient forests, of moonlit nights, of secrets whispered on the wind. It was a voice that resonated deep within her soul. Briar stopped a few feet away, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She searched for words, but her mind was a blank, overwhelmed by the intensity of his presence, by the realization that everything she thought she knew about her life, about her past, was about to change. Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice a trembling whisper. His golden eyes studied her, a flicker of something unreadable passing through their depths. "You know who I am, Briar Winter," he said, his voice soft, yet firm. "Or at least you will." He took a step closer, and Briar instinctively flinched, a wave of fear washing over her. But he stopped, respecting the distance, his gaze softening slightly. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice a soothing balm against her frayed nerves. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help you." "Help me?" Briar echoed, her voice laced with skepticism. "Help me with what?" "To understand," he replied, his golden eyes holding hers. "To understand who you are, what you are, and why you were brought back here." He gestured towards the woods behind him, the dark trees looming like silent sentinels. "The answers you seek lie within," he said. "Within the ruins of the forgotten. Within the heart of the Hollowfang." Briar glanced at the woods, a shiver running down her spine. She remembered Maeve's warnings, her fear of the ancient forest, of the secrets it held. But she also remembered the pull, the irresistible force that had drawn her here, to this man, to this place. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. He smiled again, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of both fear and excitement through her. "You will," he said. "Tonight, under the blood moon, the truth will be revealed. Tonight, you will reclaim what was stolen." He turned and began to walk into the woods, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Briar hesitated for a moment, her mind battling between fear and a growing sense of inevitability. This was her destiny, the reason she had been called back to Black Hollow. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, and followed him into the darkness, the blood moon casting an eerie, crimson glow upon her path. The forest floor seemed to welcome her, the leaves quieting at her step. She was meant to be here. Chapter 4. Ruins of the Forgotten. The woods were a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, mixed with a subtle, musky scent that emanated from the man who walked ahead of her. Briar kept her eyes fixed on his broad back, his dark hair swaying with each step, his movements fluid and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was both hunter and hunted, drawn to him by an unseen force, yet wary of the danger he represented. The trees grew thicker, their branches intertwining overhead, blocking out most of the moonlight. The only light came from the faint, reddish glow that filtered through the leaves, casting an eerie, otherworldly ambience. The silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs underfoot, and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. He moved with a confidence and familiarity that suggested he knew these woods intimately, navigating the winding paths with ease. Briar struggled to keep up, her city shoes slipping on the uneven ground, her breath coming in ragged gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a clearing. In the center stood the ruins of what must have once been a grand structure, perhaps a church or a manor house. Stone walls, crumbled and overgrown with ivy, reached towards the sky like skeletal fingers. Arched windows, their glass long shattered, gaped like empty eye sockets. The air here was even heavier, charged with a palpable sense of history, of secrets buried beneath the stones. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to face her. The moonlight illuminated his features, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "This is it," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed through the ruins. "The place where it all began. And where it will all end." Briar stepped into the clearing, her gaze sweeping over the ruins. A sense of awe and dread washed over her. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, the echoes of countless lives lived and lost within these walls. What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was once the heart of the Hollowfang," he replied, his eyes fixed on the ruins. "A place of power, of magic, of connection." He began to walk towards the largest of the ruined structures, a crumbling archway that must have once been the main entrance. Briar followed, her heart pounding in her chest. As they approached the archway, Briar noticed carvings on the stone, intricate designs of wolves, intertwined with thorny vines, and were those drops of blood? The carvings seemed to pulsate with a faint, inner light, the same reddish glow as the blood moon above. He stopped before the archway, turning to face her again. His golden eyes held hers, their intensity unwavering. "The Hollowfang was not just a place," he said, his voice soft, yet resonant. "It was a people, a lineage, a curse." Briar frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "A curse?" He nodded slowly. "A curse that has been passed down through generations," he said. "A curse that binds us to this land, to this power, to each other." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers surprisingly warm against her skin. A jolt of electricity shot through her, a sudden, intense connection that made her gasp. She felt a rush of emotions, a flood of memories that were not her own, a sense of belonging and fear. "You are a descendant of the Hollowfang, Briar," he said, his voice a low murmur in her ear. "The last of your line, the heir to its power and its curse." Briar stared at him, her mind reeling. This was too much, too fast. It was like stepping into a dream, a nightmare, a reality she couldn't comprehend. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice shaking. But even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the very depths of her soul. The connection to this place, to this man, was undeniable. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Belief is not required, Briar," he said. "Only acceptance. Only surrender." He gestured towards the archway, towards the darkness that lay beyond. "The truth awaits you," he said. "Are you ready to face it?" The question hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. The blood moon seemed to pulse brighter, casting an even more intense crimson glow upon the ruins. The carvings on the archway seemed to writhe and shift, the wolves snarling, the blood dripping. And within the darkness, Briar thought she saw movement, shadows flickering, eyes watching. The whispers returned, swirling around her. "The time has come." It was not a choice. It never had been. Chapter 5. Eyes of Golden Ember. Briar's hesitation was a tangible thing, a weight in the air between them. The ruins seemed to hold their breath, the wind dying down to a mere whisper, the shadows deepening in anticipation. His golden eyes, however, remained steady, unwavering, reflecting not judgment, but a profound understanding of the turmoil raging within her. They held a depth of experience, of sorrow, and of something that sparked a flicker of hope within her, an unwavering acceptance. Briar began, her voice catching in her throat, the words failing her. She looked from the daunting darkness of the archway back to his face, searching for reassurance, for a reason to turn back, for anything to anchor her to the reality she had known. But there was nothing. Only the reflection of the blood moon in his extraordinary eyes, and the undeniable pull of destiny. He didn't press her, didn't try to persuade her with words. He simply waited, his presence a silent strength, a beacon in the overwhelming darkness of the unknown. He understood the weight of what he was asking, the sheer terror of stepping into a truth that could shatter her world. Finally, with a deep, shuddering breath, Briar straightened her shoulders, a flicker of defiance sparking in her own hazel eyes. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was now tempered with a growing sense of resolve, a refusal to be defined by the unknown. She was tired of running, tired of the emptiness that had haunted her for so long. If this was the path to understanding, to finally filling the void within her, then she would walk it, no matter how terrifying. "Yes," she said, her voice still trembling, but firmer now. "I'm ready." A subtle shift occurred in his demeanor. The tension that had held him rigid seemed to ease, replaced by a flicker of something that might have been relief, or perhaps even pride. He offered her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of respect. "Then follow me," he said, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. He turned and stepped through the archway, disappearing into the darkness. Briar took another deep breath, steeling her nerves, and followed. As she passed through the archway, she felt a shift in the atmosphere, a sudden drop in temperature, a thickening of the air. It was as if she had crossed a threshold, not just into a physical space, but into another realm, another reality. The darkness was almost complete, the faint moonlight unable to penetrate the thick canopy of trees and the crumbling walls of the ruin. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized that she wasn't completely blind. He was emitting a faint, golden glow, a soft, ethereal light that emanated from his very being, illuminating the path ahead. It was the same light she had seen in his eyes, now extending outwards, a beacon in the darkness. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the crunching of their footsteps on the debris-strewn ground. The ruins seemed to close in around them, the walls looming like silent giants, their shadows dancing in the flickering golden light. Briar found herself studying him, her fear gradually giving way to a growing curiosity. He moved with a grace and agility that was almost supernatural, his footsteps barely disturbing the silence. His profile was sharp and defined in the soft light, his dark hair catching the golden glow. He was undeniably beautiful, but it was a beauty that was both captivating and unsettling, a beauty that spoke of power and wildness. "What's your name?" she asked, the question breaking the silence, her voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. He glanced back at her, his golden eyes flickering in the darkness. "Rylan," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very stones of the ruin. Rylan. The name suited him, she thought. It was strong, yet melodic, a name that hinted at both power and mystery. "Rylan," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It felt right. They continued to walk, and as they did, Rylan began to tell her the story of the Hollowfang. His voice was low and captivating, weaving a tale of ancient magic, of a people who had lived in harmony with nature, who had possessed the ability to shapeshift, to transform into wolves under the light of the moon. He spoke of a sacred bond between the Hollowfang and the land, a connection that had been forged over centuries, a power that had been both a blessing and a curse. He spoke of a betrayal, of a schism within the Hollowfang, of a dark magic that had been unleashed, corrupting the sacred bond, turning it into something twisted and dangerous. He spoke of hunters who had sought to eradicate the Hollowfang, driven by fear and misunderstanding. And he spoke of a prophecy, of a descendant who would return, who would reclaim the lost power, who would either heal the broken bond or be consumed by the darkness. As he spoke, Briar began to understand. She began to see the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, the fragments of her past coalescing into a coherent, if terrifying, whole. She understood the whispers, the feeling of being watched, the strange pull she had felt towards Black Hollow, towards Rylan. They reached a large, circular chamber, the heart of the ruin. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings, similar to those on the archway. The air here was thick with power, a palpable energy that made her skin tingle. Rylan stopped before the altar, turning to face her. His golden eyes, now burning with an even greater intensity, held hers. "This is where it happened," he said, his voice hushed with reverence and sorrow. "This is where the bond was broken. And this is where it must be healed or destroyed." He took her hand, his callous touch sending another wave of that electrifying energy through her. She stared, mesmerized, into those eyes. They promised answers. But what would be the price? Chapter 6. The Stolen Legacy. Rylan's touch was a conduit, a living bridge between her present and a past she was only beginning to grasp. The energy that flowed from him wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a flood of images, emotions, and fragmented memories that weren't hers, yet felt intimately familiar. She saw flashes of a life lived under the moon, of running through the woods in a form not her own, of a connection to the land that was deeper than anything she had ever imagined. She saw faces, blurred and indistinct, but filled with love, loyalty, and a fierce protectiveness. She felt the joy of belonging, the power of unity, and the agonizing pain of betrayal. She saw the faces of those who hunted them, contorted with fear and hatred. And she saw him, Rylan younger, but with the same golden eyes, filled with a sorrow that mirrored her own. The visions were overwhelming, a torrent of information that threatened to drown her. She gasped, pulling her hand away, breaking the connection. The images receded, leaving her breathless and disoriented, her mind reeling from the sensory overload. Rylan watched her, his expression unreadable, his golden eyes dimmed slightly, as if reflecting her own inner turmoil. He didn't speak, allowing her the time she needed to process, to assimilate the fragments of a past that was now undeniably hers. "I saw," Briar stammered, her voice trembling, struggling to articulate the overwhelming experience. "I felt the echoes of your ancestors," Rylan finished for her, his voice soft, yet firm. "The memories that are woven into your blood, into your very being." He gestured towards the altar, its surface now glowing faintly with the same reddish hue as the blood moon. "This altar is a focal point," he explained. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin, where the past can bleed into the present." He began to circle the altar slowly, his movements deliberate, his voice taking on a rhythmic, almost chanting quality. He spoke of the Hollowfang's legacy, of the power they had wielded, of the responsibility that came with it. "They were not just shapeshifters, Briar," he said. "They were guardians of this land, protectors of the balance between the human world and the natural world. They understood the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate web of life that sustains us all." He stopped, his golden eyes fixed on her. "But that power was coveted," he continued, his voice hardening with anger and sorrow. "Others sought to control it, to exploit it for their own selfish gain. And they succeeded, at least in part." He explained how a faction within the Hollowfang, driven by greed and a thirst for dominance, had sought to break the ancient pact with the land, to twist the shape-shifting ability into a weapon of war. This faction, led by a powerful sorceress named Morwenna, had used dark magic to amplify their powers, but at a terrible cost. The bond with the land had been corrupted, turning the Hollowfang's gift into a curse. "Morwenna stole the heart of the Hollowfang's power," Rylan said, his voice heavy with grief. "A sacred artifact, imbued with the essence of the land, the key to controlling the shape-shifting ability. She used it to create a rift, a division within the Hollowfang, turning brother against brother, sister against sister." He pointed to a specific carving on the altar, a depiction of a wolf's head with a gaping, empty socket where one eye should have been. "That represents the stolen legacy," he said. "The missing piece, the source of the curse." Briar stared at the carving, a chill running down her spine. She understood now. The emptiness she had felt all her life, the sense of incompleteness, was not just a personal failing. It was the echo of the stolen legacy, the missing piece of her ancestral heritage. What would happen to the artifact? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was hidden, Rylan replied. Morwenna knew that if it were ever recovered, her power would be diminished. She scattered its fragments across the land, guarded by powerful enchantments, ensuring that no one could ever reunite them. He looked at her, his golden eyes burning with a renewed intensity. But the prophecy speaks of a descendant, he said. One who would possess the ability to find the fragments, to restore the artifact, to heal the broken bond. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, urgent murmur. That descendant is you, Briar, he said. You are the Hollowfang's heir. You are the one who can reclaim what was stolen. He held up his hand, and in his palm, Briar noticed for the first time that he wore a silver ring, an identical match to one Maeve had gifted her years ago, tucked away in a dusty, untouched drawer. The ring she had almost forgotten. The ring he was now asking her for. Chapter 7. Echoes of a Lost Name. The Silver Ring. Briar's gaze was riveted to the intricate design on Rylan's hand, a swirling pattern of wolves and vines, identical to the one she had tucked away, a forgotten relic of a past she was now being forced to confront. Her fingers instinctively went to her chest, as if she could feel the weight of the ring through her clothes, through the layers of time and denial that had separated her from her true heritage. Maeve gave me a ring just like that, she said, her voice barely a whisper, her mind struggling to reconcile the mundane memory with the extraordinary reality unfolding before her. Rylan nodded slowly, his golden eyes holding hers.
She knew, he said.
She always knew. She was preparing you, even then, for this moment. He held out his hand, his palm open, the ring gleaming in the faint, reddish light. It's a key, he explained. A conduit to the ancient magic, a way to access the memories and the power that are your birthright. Briar hesitated, her mind awash with conflicting emotions. Fear, doubt, disbelief, but also a growing sense of recognition, of belonging, of a destiny that she could no longer ignore. The ring represented more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of her connection to the Hollowfang, to Rylan, to the very land beneath her feet. I don't know if I can, she said, her voice shaking. I'm not like you. I'm not a wolf. Rylan's expression softened, a flicker of understanding passing through his golden eyes. You don't have to be a wolf, Briar, he said, his voice gentle and reassuring. You just have to be yourself. You have the blood of the Hollowfang within you, the potential to awaken the power that lies dormant. He took a step closer, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. The ring will help you, he said. It will guide you, protect you, connect you to the fragments of the stolen artifact. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a familiar jolt of energy through her. It was a different sensation this time, less overwhelming, more focused, as if the ring itself was acting as a filter, channeling the power in a way she could manage. Put it on, he urged, his voice a low murmur in her ear. Let it awaken the echoes of your lost name. Let it guide you to your true self. Briar looked at the ring, then at Rylan's face, searching for any sign of deception, of manipulation. But there was nothing, only sincerity, and a deep, unwavering belief in her. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, and nodded. She retrieved the ring from the dusty drawer in her memory, the drawer of her life where she had stored away the uncomfortable, the unexplained, the things that didn't fit into her carefully constructed reality. She held it in her palm, the silver cool against her skin. It felt familiar, as if it had always belonged to her, as if it were a missing piece of herself. With trembling fingers, she slipped the ring onto her left ring finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. As soon as it settled into place, a surge of energy pulsed through her, a wave of warmth that spread from her hand to her arm, to her entire body. She gasped, her eyes widening in surprise and awe. The ruins seemed to come alive. The carvings on the altar pulsed with a brighter light, The air shimmered with energy, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her, coalescing into a chorus of voices, ancient and powerful. She felt a connection to the land, to the trees, to the very stones beneath her feet. She felt the presence of her ancestors, their spirits reaching out to her, guiding her, welcoming her home. And she felt a connection to Rylan, deeper and more profound than anything she had ever experienced. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a newfound understanding, a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for so long. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was now overshadowed by a growing sense of excitement, of anticipation, of belonging. Rylan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his face, making him even more strikingly beautiful. "Welcome home, Briarwinter," he said, his voice filled with warmth and something else, something that made her heart flutter. "Welcome home, Hollowfang's heir." The whispers now were not disembodied. They were hers, her family's, calling her a new name, a true name, a name she had been running from all her life, but now embraced. Lyra. The sound vibrated on her lips, a secret spoken aloud for the first time in decades. And Rylan's eyes, those pools of molten gold, showed a flicker of something she'd not seen before. Recognition. Chapter 8. The Circle of Unease. The revelation of her true name, Lyra, hung in the air, a shimmering echo that resonated not just within the ruins, but within the very core of Lyra's being. The name felt ancient, powerful, and undeniably right, a key unlocking a hidden chamber within her soul. She felt a shift within herself, a subtle realignment of her identity, a shedding of the old, uncertain self, and an embracing of a new, empowered persona. Rylan watched her, his golden eyes filled with a warmth that went beyond mere approval. It was a recognition, a deep understanding of the transformation she was undergoing. He had known her true name all along, had perhaps been waiting for her to discover it herself, to claim it as her own. "Lyra," he said, the name rolling off his tongue with a reverence that sent a shiver of both pleasure and trepidation through her. "It suits you." Lyra, she would have to get used to thinking of herself that way, looked at him, her gaze searching, questioning. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice still trembling slightly from the intensity of the revelation. "Your aunt," Rylan replied, a faint smile playing on his lips.
"Maeve.
She told me many years ago. She entrusted me with your protection, with guiding you when the time came." Lyra absorbed this information, her mind racing to connect the dots, to understand the intricate web of secrets and connections that had shaped her life. Maeve, the enigmatic aunt who had always seemed to know more than she let on, had been a key player in this unfolding drama, a silent guardian watching over her from afar. "But why didn't she tell me herself?" Lyra asked, a hint of hurt and confusion in her voice. Rylan's expression softened, his golden eyes filled with a deep sadness. "She wanted to," he said. "But she was afraid. Afraid of the danger. Afraid of what might happen if the wrong people discovered your true identity." He gestured towards the altar, its carvings pulsing with a steady, rhythmic glow. "The Hollowfang has enemies, Lyra," he said. "Those who still seek to control its power, to exploit it for their own gain. Morwenna's legacy lives on, her followers still lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The idyllic image of Black Hollow, the quaint, forgotten town, was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a darker, more dangerous reality. She was not just returning to her ancestral home, she was stepping into a war, a battle between ancient forces that she was only beginning to understand. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice laced with a newfound determination. She was no longer the lost, uncertain woman who had arrived in Black Hollow just a few hours ago. She was Lyra, the Hollowfang's heir, and she would not shy away from her destiny. Rylan's gaze held hers, his golden eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "We find the fragments," he said. "We restore the artifact, and we heal the broken bond." He explained that the first fragment was hidden somewhere within Black Hollow, protected by a powerful enchantment. He believed that Maeve's house held a clue, a hidden message that would lead them to it. But we must be careful, he warned. We are not alone in this. The circle of unease is watching. Lyra frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. The circle of unease? Rylan nodded grimly. A group of individuals, descendants of Morwenna's followers, he explained. They know of the prophecy, and they will do anything to stop you from fulfilling it. They are powerful, ruthless, and they have eyes and ears everywhere. He described them as shapeshifters, like the Hollowfang, but their abilities were twisted, corrupted by the dark magic that flowed through their veins. They were driven by a desire to control the Hollowfang's power, to use it for their own selfish purposes. Lyra felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce determination. She would not be intimidated. She would not allow these usurpers to steal her legacy, to desecrate the memory of her ancestors. We'll be ready for them, she said, her voice firm, her eyes flashing with a newfound confidence. Rylan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of excitement through her. I know you will, he said, but for now, we must return to Maeve's house. The answers we seek are hidden within its walls. They left the ruins, the blood moon casting long, eerie shadows across their path. As they walked, Lyra felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by unseen enemies. The whispers had returned, but they were no longer the welcoming voices of her ancestors. They were the whispers of the Circle of Unease, their voices laced with malice and threat. She could almost feel their eyes on her, burning through her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lay ahead. And above it all, the name they hissed. Lyra. Hollowfang, it was a threat and a promise, and the new Lyra was certain to keep the latter from them. Chapter 9. A touch of ancient magic. The walk back to Maeve's house was fraught with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl seemed to carry a hidden threat. Lyra's senses were heightened, her awareness expanded, as if the ancient magic of the Hollowfang was already beginning to awaken within her. She could feel Rylan's presence beside her, a silent, reassuring strength, his golden eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, alert for any sign of danger. The whispers followed them, a constant, unsettling murmur that seemed to weave through the very fabric of the night. Lyra, Hollowfang, the voices were laced with malice, a palpable hatred that made her skin crawl. She knew that the Circle of Unease was watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. When they reached the house, it loomed before them, dark and imposing, its shadows stretching out like grasping claws. The whispers seemed to intensify, swirling around the house, as if the very walls were imbued with the circle's malevolent presence. Rylan stopped at the edge of the overgrown garden, his gaze fixed on the house. Be careful, Lyra, he said, his voice low and urgent. They may be inside. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out and took Rylan's hand, her fingers interlacing with his. His touch was a grounding force, a source of strength and reassurance in the face of the unknown. They moved slowly, cautiously, towards the front door, their senses on high alert. The key, still heavy in Lyra's pocket, felt warm against her skin, as if pulsating with a hidden energy. She inserted the key into the lock, the tumblers clicking softly in the silence. The door creaked open, revealing the cavernous hallway, shrouded in shadows. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else, something subtly metallic and acrid, a scent that made Lyra's stomach churn. It was the scent of the Circle, the scent of their corrupted magic. Rylan stepped inside first, his body tense, his senses straining for any sign of movement. Lyra followed close behind, her hand still gripping his. They moved slowly through the house, checking each room, their footsteps echoing on the creaking floorboards. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the whispers, which seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. They reached the parlor, the room where Lyra had first sensed the presence of the Circle, the room where the crimson dress had called to her. The oil lamp she had lit earlier had burned out, leaving the room in near total darkness. Rylan reached into his pocket and produced a small, smooth stone, which he held in his palm. He closed his eyes, muttering a few words in a language Lyra didn't understand, a language that seemed to resonate with the ancient magic of the Hollowfang. The stone began to glow with a soft, golden light, illuminating the room with a warm, ethereal ambience. As the light spread, Lyra saw them. 3 figures, standing in the shadows at the far end of the room. They were tall and lean, their features obscured by the darkness, but their eyes glowed with a malevolent, reddish light, the same color as the corrupted carvings on the altar. The circle of unease. Lyra felt a surge of fear, but she stood her ground, her grip tightening on Rylan's hand. She would not be intimidated. She would not run. The figures stepped forward, their movements fluid and graceful, like predators stalking their prey. They were dressed in dark clothing, their faces hidden behind masks made of bone and feathers. Lyra Hollowfang, one of them hissed, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to scrape against her very soul. "We've been waiting for you. You should have stayed away," another said, his voice equally menacing. "This is not your place. The Hollowfang's power belongs to us," the third figure snarled. "We will not allow you to reclaim it." Rylan stepped forward, shielding Lyra with his body. "You have no claim here," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "The Hollowfang's legacy belongs to its rightful heir." The figures laughed, a chilling, mocking sound that echoed through the room. "The heir is weak," one of them said. "She is untrained, unprepared. She will be easily broken." Before Rylan could respond, one of the figures lunged forward, his hand outstretched, his fingers tipped with claws that shimmered with a dark, oily magic. Rylan reacted instantly, pushing Lyra behind him and meeting the attack with a swift, powerful movement. The room erupted in chaos. The figures attacked with a savage ferocity, their claws tearing at Rylan's flesh, their corrupted magic lashing out like a venomous snake. Rylan fought back with a strength and agility that was almost supernatural, his body moving with a speed and precision that defied human limitations. Lyra watched in horror, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt helpless, useless, unable to assist Rylan in the fight. But as she watched, she felt a surge of something else, something deep within her, a spark of ancient power awakening. The ring on her finger burned with a fierce heat, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her, urging her to act. She reached out her hand, instinctively, towards the figure who was attacking Rylan. A wave of energy pulsed from her palm, a force she didn't know she possessed, a touch of the ancient magic of the Hollowfang. The energy struck the figure, throwing him back against the wall with a sickening thud. His mask cracked, revealing a pale, gaunt face twisted with pain and surprise. He'd felt it. They all had. The fight had changed. Chapter 10. The Pact of Shadows. The figure slammed against the wall, the impact echoing through the parlor. A collective gasp escaped the other 2 members of the circle of unease, their reddish eyes widening in disbelief. They had underestimated her. They had dismissed her as weak, untrained, a mere shadow of her ancestors. But the raw power that had surged from Lyra's hand was undeniable, a testament to the ancient magic that flowed through her veins. Rylan, taking advantage of the momentary distraction, pressed his attack, his movements blurring into a whirlwind of motion. He struck with the precision and ferocity of a cornered wolf, his fists and feet connecting with bone-jarring force. The 2 remaining figures staggered back, their confidence shaken, their masks cracking under the onslaught. Lyra, however, was still reeling from the unexpected surge of power. She felt different. The ring on her finger pulsed with a warm, vibrant energy, and she could sense a connection to the house, to the land, to the very air around her, a connection that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She was no longer just a spectator, she was a participant, a wielder of a power she was only beginning to understand. What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling, her gaze fixed on her outstretched hand. Rylan, without breaking his stride, glanced back at her, his golden eyes flashing with a mixture of pride and concern. "Your birthright, Lyra," he said, his voice tight with exertion. "The magic of the Hollowfang. Embrace it." His words were a catalyst. Lyra took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, focusing her will. She could feel the power coursing through her, a tingling sensation that spread from her fingertips to her toes. She raised her hand again, this time with intention, with purpose, and directed a surge of energy towards one of the remaining figures. The energy struck him squarely in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him against a bookshelf, sending a cascade of leather-bound volumes tumbling to the floor. He landed with a groan, his mask shattered, revealing a face contorted with pain and rage. The last remaining figure, seeing his companions defeated, hesitated, his reddish eyes flickering with fear. He realized that he was outmatched, that the tide of the battle had turned. He took a step back, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. We yield," he stammered, his voice trembling. "We will leave you in peace." Rylan stopped, his chest heaving, his body covered in cuts and bruises, but his golden eyes still burning with a fierce intensity. He looked at Lyra, his gaze questioning, seeking her approval. Lyra met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a newfound determination. She had tasted power, and she would not be intimidated. She would not allow these intruders to dictate her destiny. "No," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "You will not leave. Not until you tell us what you know. Not until you reveal your plans." The figure hesitated, his fear evident, but he knew that he had no choice. He was at their mercy. We are members of the Circle of Unease," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Followers of Morwenna's legacy. We seek to control the Hollowfang's power, to use it to restore balance to the world." "Balance?" Lyra scoffed, her voice laced with derision. "By hunting and killing innocent people? By twisting the ancient magic to your own selfish purposes? The world is out of balance," the figure insisted, his voice gaining a hint of desperation. "Humans have become a plague upon this land, destroying everything in their path. The Hollowfang's power is the only way to restore order, to cleanse the earth." Rylan stepped forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You speak of cleansing, but your hands are stained with blood," he said. "You are the ones who have corrupted the balance, who have twisted the sacred bond into something dark and destructive." He turned to Lyra, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "They are bound by a pact," he explained. "A pact of shadows, forged with dark magic. They are slaves to Morwenna's will, even centuries after her death." He looked back at the figure, his gaze unwavering. "Tell us," he commanded. "Tell us where the other fragments are hidden. Tell us how to break the pact." The figure hesitated, his eyes darting between Rylan and Lyra, his fear battling with his loyalty to the Circle. He knew that revealing their secrets would be a betrayal, a violation of their sacred oath. But he also knew that he had no other choice. His life, and the lives of his companions, were in their hands. The decision, a heavy weight, showed on his face. He closed his eyes a moment, steeling himself. When he opened them again, the reddish glow was even brighter, fueled by desperate resolve. The old cathedral, he rasped, his voice breaking. Beneath the altar, a hidden chamber. Chapter 11. Beneath the Veil of Secrets. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. The old cathedral, a place of worship, of reverence, now tainted by the shadow of Morwenna's legacy. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of venturing into such a place steeped in both sacred and profane power, filled her with a mixture of dread and determination. Rylan, however, seemed unfazed. He had known this was coming, had perhaps even anticipated it. His golden eyes narrowed, his expression hardening with resolve. "The cathedral," he repeated, his voice a low murmur. "Of course. It's the perfect hiding place. A place of power, masked by a veil of sanctity." He turned to the captured members of the Circle of Unease, his gaze unwavering. You will lead us there, he commanded, and you will show us the entrance to the hidden chamber. The figures hesitated, their fear evident, but they knew that they had no choice. They were at Rylan and Lyra's mercy, their lives hanging in the balance. We cannot, one of them stammered, his voice trembling. The chamber is protected by powerful enchantments. Only those of Morwenna's bloodline can enter. Rylan smiled, a cold, chilling smile that sent a shiver down Lyra's spine. Then you will break the enchantments, he said. Or you will face the consequences. The figures exchanged a nervous glance, their fear palpable. They knew that Rylan was not making an idle threat. He was a force to be reckoned with, a powerful shapeshifter who would not hesitate to use his strength against them. We will do as you ask, the leader of the group finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But we warn you, the cathedral is not what it seems. It is a place of shadows, of secrets, of despair. They left Maeve's house, the defeated members of the circle leading the way, their movements slow and reluctant. The blood moon still hung high in the sky, casting an eerie, crimson glow upon the town. The streets were deserted, the houses dark and silent, as if the entire population of Black Hollow was holding its breath, waiting for the outcome of this fateful night. As they walked, Lyra felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by unseen eyes. The whispers had returned, but they were no longer the malicious voices of the circle. They were different, softer, more mournful, as if the very stones of Black Hollow were lamenting the darkness that had fallen upon them. The cathedral loomed before them, a massive, Gothic structure that dominated the town square. Its stained glass windows, depicting scenes of saints and angels, were dark and lifeless, their colors muted by the blood moon's eerie light. The entrance was a towering archway, adorned with intricate carvings of gargoyles and demons, their faces contorted in expressions of malice and despair. Lyra hesitated at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the power emanating from the cathedral, a palpable force that both attracted and repelled her. It was a place of ancient magic, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, a place where the past could bleed into the present. Rylan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch a grounding force in the face of the overwhelming darkness. Stay close to me, Lyra, he said, his voice soft, yet firm. And trust your instincts. They entered the cathedral, the heavy wooden doors creaking open with a mournful groan. The interior was vast and cavernous, the air thick with the scent of incense and decay. The only light came from the faint, reddish glow of the blood moon filtering through the stained glass windows, casting eerie, elongated shadows across the stone floor. The members of the circle led them towards the main altar, a massive structure made of white marble, adorned with intricate carvings of religious scenes. Lyra could feel the power emanating from the altar, a palpable force that made her skin tingle. The entrance is beneath the altar, the leader of the circle said, his voice trembling. But it is protected by a powerful enchantment. We will need to perform a ritual to break it. They gathered around the altar, the members of the circle forming a triangle, their hands raised, their eyes closed. They began to chant in a low, guttural language, the same language Rylan had used earlier to light the stone in Maeve's house. The air around them shimmered with energy, and the carvings on the altar began to glow with a faint, reddish light. As the chanting intensified, Lyra felt a surge of power within her, a response to the ancient magic being unleashed. The ring on her finger burned with a fierce heat, and she felt a connection to the cathedral, to the land, to the very essence of the Hollowfang. Suddenly, the floor beneath the altar began to tremble. A crack appeared, widening into a gaping hole, revealing a dark, descending staircase. The chanting stopped, and the members of the circle stepped back, their faces pale and drained. The entrance is open, the leader said, his voice barely a whisper. But be warned, what lies below is not for the faint of heart. Rylan looked at Lyra, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. Are you ready? He asked. Lyra took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. She was afraid, but she was also determined. She would not back down. She would not let fear control her. "Yes," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "I'm ready." They descended into the darkness, the stone steps cold and damp beneath their feet. The air grew colder, heavier, and the scent of decay intensified. Lyra could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, something malevolent. The staircase seemed to go on forever, until finally a dim, flickering, crimson glow from somewhere deep below. What awaited them was not salvation. It was a trap. Chapter 12. The Hunter's Pursuit. The flickering crimson light grew stronger as they descended, revealing a vast, subterranean chamber. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else, something metallic and acrid, the familiar scent of corrupted magic. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with rough-hewn stone, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. In the center stood a massive, stone sarcophagus, its surface covered in intricate carvings similar to those on the altar above, but twisted, distorted, reflecting the dark magic that had been used to create them. As they stepped into the chamber, the three members of the circle of unease collapsed, their bodies slumping to the ground as if their strings had been cut. Lyra gasped, rushing to their side, but Rylan stopped her, his hand gripping her arm with surprising strength. "They're not dead," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But they're no longer of any use to us."
Or to them.
Lyra looked at him, her eyes widening in confusion and alarm. "Them?" she whispered. Before Rylan could answer, a voice echoed through the chamber, a cold, chilling voice that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Welcome, Lyra Hollowfang," the voice said. Or should I say Lyra Winter? Lyra froze, her blood turning to ice. The voice was familiar, yet she couldn't place it. It was a voice filled with malice, with hatred, with a chilling sense of triumph. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding them, their eyes glowing with a reddish light. They were members of the Circle of Unease, but these were not the defeated, broken figures they had left above. These were warriors, clad in dark armor, their weapons drawn, their faces hidden behind menacing masks. And at their head stood a figure taller than the rest, his presence radiating a power that made the air crackle with energy. He wore a long, flowing cloak made of dark feathers, and his face was hidden behind a mask made of polished bone, carved in the shape of a wolf's skull. But Lyra knew who he was. She recognized the voice, the chilling familiarity that had sent shivers down her spine. It was the taxi driver, the silent, burly man who had driven her from the station to Maeve's house, the man whose eyes had seemed to see right through her. He removed his mask, revealing a face that was both familiar and terrifying. It was the face of an older man, his features weathered and lined, but his eyes were not human. They glowed with the same reddish light as the others, but with an intensity that was far greater, a power that was both captivating and repulsive. "You," Lyra stammered, her voice trembling. You were watching me all along." The man smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a shiver of dread through her. "Of course, my dear," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We wouldn't want to miss the return of the prodigal daughter, would we?" He gestured towards the sarcophagus. "You see, Lyra," he continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "We knew you would come. We knew you would seek the fragments. And we knew that you would lead us to them." Lyra felt a surge of anger, a fierce determination to fight back. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "We will stop you." The man laughed, a chilling, mocking sound that echoed through the chamber. "You?" he scoffed. "You are nothing, Lyra. A weak, untrained girl, playing at being a sorceress. You are no match for us." Rylan stepped forward, his body tense, his golden eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "She is not alone," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "And she is stronger than you think." The man turned his gaze to Rylan, his reddish eyes narrowing. "Ah, yes," he said. "The pet. The loyal dog, guarding his mistress. How touching." He raised his hand, and the warriors surrounding them moved forward, their weapons raised, their eyes filled with malice. "Kill them," he commanded, "and bring me the ring." The chamber erupted in chaos. The warriors attacked with a savage ferocity, their weapons clashing against Ryland's fists and feet. Ryland fought back with a strength and agility that was almost supernatural, his movements blurring into a whirlwind of motion. Lyra, however, was not helpless. The ring on her finger pulsed with a warm, vibrant energy, and she could feel the ancient magic of the Hollowfang coursing through her veins. She raised her hands, focusing her will, and unleashed a wave of energy that struck the warriors, throwing them back against the walls. The battle raged, a chaotic dance of light and shadow, of steel and magic. Lyra and Ryland fought side by side, their movements synchronized, their powers complementing each other. They were a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the ancient bond between the Hollowfang and its protectors. But they were surrounded, and he was still standing there, a smirk on his face, watching the fight unfold as if it were entertainment. It was time to show him what she was truly capable of. Chapter 13. Scars of the Past. Lyra's power surged, fueled by adrenaline and a deep-seated ancestral rage. The warriors of the circle, despite their numbers and corrupted magic, were proving to be no match for the combined might of her and Ryland. Each blast of energy from her hands sent them reeling, their masks cracking, their armor denting under the force. Ryland moved like a whirlwind, a blur of motion, his strikes precise and devastating. But the leader, the man who had once been the silent taxi driver, remained untouched, observing the fray with a detached amusement that infuriated Lyra. He was the key she knew. He was the source of their power, the linchpin of their plan. And he was underestimating her. Terribly. As Ryland dispatched another warrior, Lyra focused her attention on the leader. She could feel the ring on her finger burning with an almost unbearable heat, channeling the ancient magic of the Hollowfang into her very being. She raised her hands, drawing upon the power, feeling it build within her like a gathering storm. "You think you can control me?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber, amplified by the magic. "You think you can steal my legacy? You are wrong." She unleashed a torrent of energy, a blinding wave of light that slammed into the leader, throwing him back against the sarcophagus with a resounding crash. He cried out, a mixture of pain and surprise, his mask shattering, revealing his face fully for the first time. And as Lyra saw his face, she recognized him. Not just from the taxi, but from the fragmented memories that had flooded her mind, from the echoes of her ancestors. He was not just a follower of Morwenna, he was related to her. The lines of his face, the shape of his eyes, the cruel set of his mouth, they were echoes of the portraits she had seen in Maeve's house, of the ancient enemies of the Hollowfang. She gasped, her voice trembling with realization. You're one of them." He struggled to his feet, his face contorted with rage, his reddish eyes burning with hatred. "Yes, Lyra," he hissed, his voice raspy with pain. "I am Alaric, descendant of Morwenna, and I will finish what she started. I will claim the Hollowfang's power for my own." He raised his hands, and the carvings on the sarcophagus began to glow with a malevolent, reddish light. The air grew thick with corrupted magic, a palpable force that pressed down on Lyra, making it difficult to breathe. "You cannot stop me, Lyra," Alaric said, his voice dripping with confidence. "The sarcophagus contains the essence of Morwenna's power. It will amplify my magic, making me invincible." Lyra felt a surge of fear, but she refused to yield. She would not let this monster win. She would not let him desecrate the memory of her ancestors. She turned to Ryland, her eyes pleading, desperate. "Ryland, we have to stop him," she cried. "We have to destroy the sarcophagus." Ryland nodded, his golden eyes filled with a fierce determination. He had dispatched the last of the warriors, and he was now focused solely on Alaric. "Together, Lyra," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "We do this together." They joined hands, their fingers interlacing, their powers merging, becoming one. The ring on Lyra's finger pulsed with an almost blinding light, and the ancient magic of the Hollowfang surged through them, uniting them in a bond that was stronger than blood, stronger than magic, stronger than anything Alaric could possibly comprehend. They raised their hands together, focusing their combined power on the sarcophagus. A beam of pure, golden light erupted from their hands, striking the sarcophagus with tremendous force. The sarcophagus cracked, fissures spreading across its surface like spiderwebs. The reddish light emanating from the carvings flickered and died, and the corrupted magic that had filled the chamber began to dissipate. Alaric cried out in rage and frustration, his power waning, his invincibility shattered. He lunged at them, his hands outstretched, his fingers tipped with claws that shimmered with the last vestiges of his corrupted magic. But it was too late. The sarcophagus exploded, sending shards of stone flying through the chamber. A wave of pure energy washed over them, cleansing the chamber, purifying the corrupted magic, restoring the balance. Alaric screamed, his body dissolving into shadows, his essence dissipating into nothingness. The threat was over. The legacy of Morwenna had been extinguished, at least for now. Lyra and Ryland stood together, their hands still clasped, their bodies trembling from the exertion. They had done it. They had faced their fears, they had embraced their destiny, and they had triumphed. But as the dust settled, Lyra saw something glint in the dim light, underneath where Alaric's body had vanished. A deep scar, running down Ryland's arm. A scar she could have sworn wasn't there before. Chapter 14. The Unveiling of Truth. The silence that followed the explosion was profound, broken only by their ragged breathing and the faint dripping of water from the chamber's ceiling. The air, once thick with corrupted magic, was now clean, crisp, almost invigorating. The crimson glow had vanished, replaced by a soft, ethereal light that emanated from Lyra's ring, a beacon of hope in the aftermath of the battle. Lyra's gaze was drawn to Ryland's arm, to the fresh, angry-looking scar that marred his skin. It was a long, jagged wound, running from his shoulder to his elbow, as if he had been slashed by a blade of pure darkness. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the outline of the scar, her touch sending a shiver of both concern and recognition through her. "Ryland," she whispered, her voice trembling. How did this happen?" Ryland looked down at his arm, his golden eyes clouding with a mixture of pain and something else, something that looked like shame. He hesitated, his jaw clenching, as if struggling to find the words. It was during the fight," he said, his voice strained. "Alaric, he caught me off guard." But Lyra knew that wasn't the whole truth. She had seen the fight, had witnessed Ryland's incredible agility and strength. He had been in complete control, his movements precise and devastating. There was no way Alaric, in his weakened state, could have inflicted such a wound. And then she remembered. The fragmented memories that had flooded her mind, the echoes of her ancestors. She had seen this scar before, or something very much like it. She had seen it on the arm of another, a figure shrouded in shadows, a figure who had been both a protector and a betrayer. "Ryland," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes searching his. "Tell me the truth. Please." Ryland looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a deep sorrow, a pain that went beyond the physical wound on his arm. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving, as if preparing to confess a long-held secret. It's a long story, Lyra," he said, his voice hesitant. "A story that goes back centuries, to the very beginning of the Hollowfang." He began to speak, his voice low and measured, weaving a tale of ancient betrayals, of forbidden love, of a curse that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of his own lineage, of his ancestors who had been among the first shapeshifters, the original members of the Hollowfang. He spoke of a time when the Hollowfang had lived in harmony with nature, when their powers had been used for good, for protecting the balance between the human world and the natural world. But then Morwenna had come, with her seductive promises of power, of dominance, of control. And Ryland's ancestor, a powerful shapeshifter named Kaelin, had been seduced by her. He had fallen in love with her, had betrayed his own people, had helped her to steal the heart of the Hollowfang's power. Kaelin was my ancestor, direct descendant in my bloodline, Rylan said, his voice heavy with shame and guilt. He was the one who inflicted this scar upon the then leader of the true Hollowfang, marking him, weakening the true magic in the original conflict. The scar, it's a mark of his betrayal, a reminder of the darkness that flows through my veins. Lyra stared at him, her mind reeling. She had known that Rylan carried a heavy burden, that he was haunted by a past he couldn't escape. But she had never imagined the depth of his pain, the extent of his connection to the very curse they were fighting to break. But you're not like him, she said, her voice filled with conviction. You've fought against the darkness, you've protected me, you've helped me to reclaim my legacy. Rylan smiled, a sad, bittersweet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I try, Lyra, he said, but the blood of Kaelin runs within. I am constantly wary, so very wary of my capabilities. He looked down at his arm, at the scar that was a constant reminder of his ancestors' betrayal. This scar, it's not just a physical wound, he said. It's a symbol of the darkness that I carry within me, the potential for betrayal, for destruction. He closed his eyes a moment, steeling his resolve. The magic Alaric used it resonated. With that part, with the scar. He looked back at her then, his eyes earnest. I am bound to you, Lyra, he said, his voice firm, unwavering. By destiny, by choice, by love. I will always protect you. I will always fight by your side. But you must know the truth. You must know the risk. Lyra reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. His touch was warm and reassuring, a grounding force in the face of the overwhelming revelation. I know, she said, her voice soft yet strong. And I trust you, Rylan. With my life, with my heart, with my destiny. The ancient magic of the Hollowfang surged through them, uniting them in a bond that was stronger than blood, stronger than magic, stronger than any curse. They were together, and they were not turning back. Chapter 15. A bond forged in moonlight. The revelation of Rylan's ancestry, of the darkness that he carried within him, had shaken Lyra, but it had not broken her trust. If anything, it had deepened her understanding of him, of his quiet strength, of his unwavering dedication to protecting her, to fighting against the very legacy that threatened to consume him. She saw the pain in his golden eyes, the burden of his past, and she felt a surge of love and compassion for him, a fierce determination to help him heal, to help him overcome the shadows that haunted him. They stood together in the cleansed chamber, the remnants of the shattered sarcophagus a testament to their victory, the faint glow of Lyra's ring a beacon of hope. The air was still, quiet, almost sacred. The weight of centuries of conflict seemed to have lifted, leaving behind a sense of peace, of renewal. Lyra gently cupped Rylan's face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the lines of his jaw, her eyes searching his. Rylan, she said, her voice soft, yet filled with emotion. You are not your ancestor. You are your own person. You have made your own choices, and you have chosen to be good, to be kind, to be my protector. Rylan looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something deeper, something that made Lyra's heart flutter. It was a look of love, of adoration, of a profound connection that transcended words, that transcended even the ancient magic that bound them together. Lyra, he said, his voice husky with emotion. You have given me hope. You have shown me that I can be more than my past, that I can choose my own destiny. He leaned down and gently kissed her, his lips soft and warm against hers. It was a kiss that spoke of 1,000 unspoken words, of a love that had been forged in the crucible of danger and adversity, of a bond that was unbreakable, eternal. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, that bound them together, heart and soul, for all time. Lyra returned the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck, holding him close, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, the steady beat of his heart mirroring her own. She had never felt such a connection with another person, such a sense of belonging, of completeness. She had found her home, her safe harbor, in the arms of this man, this shapeshifter, this descendant of a betrayer who had become her savior, her lover, her soulmate. When they finally broke apart, they stood for a moment, gazing into each other's eyes, their hearts overflowing with love and gratitude. The blood moon, still hanging high in the sky, cast a soft, silvery glow upon them, bathing them in its ethereal light. It was as if the universe itself was blessing their union, acknowledging their bond, celebrating their love. "What now, Lyra?" Rylan asked, his voice a low murmur. "What happens next?" Lyra smiled, her eyes sparkling with a newfound confidence, a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for so long. "We find the remaining fragments," she said. "We restore the artifact, and we heal the broken bond. We fulfill the prophecy together." Rylan nodded, his golden eyes filled with determination. "And then?" he asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Lyra took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "And then," she said, "we build a new future. A future free from the shadows of the past, a future where the Hollowfang can live in peace, in harmony with the world." They left the underground chamber, hand in hand, their steps light, their hearts filled with hope. As they ascended the stairs, the faint light of dawn began to filter through the stained glass windows of the cathedral, chasing away the last vestiges of the blood moon's eerie glow. They emerged from the cathedral, blinking in the sunlight, feeling as if they had been reborn, cleansed by the trials they had faced, strengthened by the love they had found. The town of Black Hollow seemed different now, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun. The shadows had receded, the whispers had silenced, and a sense of peace had settled over the land. But Lyra knew that their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. The circle of unease might be defeated, but the forces of darkness were always lurking, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But she was no longer afraid. She had Rylan by her side, her soulmate, her protector, her love. And together, they would face whatever the future held, united in their purpose, bound by their love, forged in the moonlight of their destiny. She looked towards the sunrise, a brilliant display of color. And she knew, beyond a doubt, their love would be just as bright. Chapter 16. The Price of Protection. The morning light brought a sense of renewal, but it also cast long shadows, reminders of the battles fought and the challenges yet to come. Lyra and Rylan walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of Black Hollow, the town slowly awakening to a new day, a new era, perhaps. The victory in the cathedral had been significant, but it was only the first step in a long and arduous journey. They returned to Maeve's house, the grand old Victorian mansion feeling less imposing now, less filled with secrets and shadows. The house seemed to welcome them, the air inside lighter, fresher, as if the very walls had breathed a sigh of relief. They went to the library, the room where Maeve had spent countless hours poring over ancient texts, seeking clues, preparing for the day when her niece would return to claim her legacy. Lyra felt a pang of sadness, a deep sense of loss for the woman who had been her only family, the woman who had sacrificed so much to protect her. She knew, Rylan, Lyra said, her voice soft, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with leather-bound volumes. She knew all along what was coming. She was preparing me, even from afar. Rylan nodded, his golden eyes filled with understanding. She was a wise woman, Lyra, he said, and a brave one. She played her part perfectly, guiding you, protecting you, until the time was right. They began to search the library, systematically, meticulously, looking for any clue that Maeve might have left behind, any hint of where the next fragment of the stolen artifact might be hidden. They examined ancient texts, deciphered cryptic symbols, and pored over faded maps, their minds working together, their knowledge complementing each other. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting beams of light through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. They found fragments of information, pieces of the puzzle, but nothing concrete, nothing that pointed them in a clear direction. Lyra was beginning to feel frustrated, her initial surge of hope waning. "It's like she's speaking in riddles," she said, her voice laced with exasperation. "She knew we'd be looking, but she made it so difficult." Rylan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch calming her frayed nerves. "She had to, Lyra," he said. The circle of unease had eyes and ears everywhere. She couldn't risk the information falling into the wrong hands. He gestured towards a small, wooden box sitting on Maeve's writing desk. "Have you looked in there?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. I didn't want to," she admitted. "It felt too personal, like I was intruding on her privacy." Rylan smiled gently. "I understand," he said. "But I think she would want you too. I think she left something for you in there, something important." Lyra hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, silver locket, intricately carved with the familiar symbols of the Hollowfang. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the locket. Maeve had always worn it, never taking it off. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. The locket felt warm to the touch, as if it were alive, as if it were pulsating with a hidden energy. She opened it, and inside, she found two things: a tiny, folded piece of parchment and a lock of auburn hair, streaked with silver, identical to her own. Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes as she recognized the hair. It was her mother's. A wave of grief washed over her, a reminder of the family she had lost, the life she had been forced to leave behind. She carefully unfolded the parchment, her hands shaking. It was a letter, written in Maeve's familiar, spidery handwriting. "My dearest Lyra," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then the time has come. You have returned to Black Hollow, and you have embraced your destiny. I am so proud of you, my child. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe. The path ahead will be difficult, filled with danger and uncertainty. But you are not alone. You have Rylan by your side, and he will protect you, guide you, love you. Trust him, Lyra. He is your soulmate, your destiny." The next fragment is hidden in the Whispering Woods, near the ancient oak where the first Hollowfang made their pact with the land. Look for the mark of the 3 claws, and you will find what you seek. But be warned, Lyra. The circle of unease will not give up easily. They will hunt you, they will try to stop you. And they will use any means necessary, even those you love.
Be strong, my child.
Be brave. And never forget who you are. You are the Hollowfang's heir. You are the hope of our future. With all my love, Maeve. Lyra closed the letter, her tears flowing freely now. Maeve's words were a powerful reminder of her responsibility, of the burden she carried, but also of the love and support that surrounded her. She looked up. Rylan stood beside her, and as they embraced, a branch scraped the window. They'd been found. Again. Chapter 17. Fractured Reflections. The scraping branch was a jarring intrusion, a stark reminder that their sanctuary was not impenetrable, that the circle of unease was still a very real and present threat. Lyra and Rylan sprang apart, their senses on high alert, their bodies tensed for action. The quiet intimacy of the library was shattered, replaced by a chilling sense of vulnerability. Rylan moved swiftly to the window, his golden eyes scanning the overgrown garden, searching for any sign of movement. The branches of the ancient oak tree outside swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling, creating the illusion of whispering voices. "They know we're here," Rylan said, his voice low and urgent. "They've been watching us." Lyra felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly tempered by a growing sense of determination. She would not be intimidated. She would not let fear paralyze her. She had come too far, faced too much, to be defeated now. "We need to leave," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "We need to find the next fragment before they do." Rylan nodded, his gaze still fixed on the garden. "The Whispering Woods," he said. "Maeve's letter, it's our only lead." They gathered their few belongings, their movements quick and efficient. Lyra tucked the locket with her mother's hair and Maeve's letter inside her shirt, close to her heart, a tangible reminder of the love and support that fueled her determination. As they prepared to leave, Lyra paused, her gaze drawn to a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall, the same mirror she had glanced into on her first night in the house, the mirror that had shown her a fleeting glimpse of something or someone watching her. She approached the mirror, her reflection staring back at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. But as she looked closer, she noticed something different. Her reflection seemed distorted, fractured, as if she were looking at herself through a shattered lens. And within the fractured reflections, she saw fleeting glimpses of other images, other faces, other scenes. She saw the whispering woods, bathed in moonlight, the ancient oak tree standing tall and proud. She saw the mark of the 3 claws carved into the bark of the tree. And she saw Rylan, his face contorted in pain, his golden eyes filled with a darkness she had never seen before. Lyra gasped, recoiling from the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. What was happening? Was the mirror showing her the future? Was it a warning? Or was it a trick, a manipulation by the Circle of Unease? Rylan, she whispered, her voice trembling. Look at the mirror. Rylan turned and approached the mirror, his golden eyes scanning its surface. He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. I don't see anything, Lyra, he said. Just our reflections. Lyra stared at him, her mind reeling. Was she imagining things? Was the stress of the situation getting to her? Or was the mirror showing her something that only she could see, something that was meant only for her eyes? But I saw, she stammered, struggling to articulate the fragmented images, the chilling vision of Rylan. I saw the woods, the tree, and you were different. Rylan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch calming her racing heart. Lyra, he said gently, it's the stress, the magic. It's playing tricks on your mind. But Lyra wasn't convinced. She had seen something, she was sure of it. And it had felt real. Too real to be dismissed as a mere illusion. We need to be careful, Rylan, she said, her voice filled with a growing sense of unease. Something's not right. I can feel it. Rylan nodded, his expression serious. I know, Lyra, he said. And we'll face whatever comes, together. They left the house, stepping out into the bright sunlight, the warmth of the day a stark contrast to the chilling vision Lyra had seen in the mirror. They headed towards the whispering woods, their steps determined, their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The woods loomed before them, dark and mysterious, the trees whispering secrets on the wind, their branches reaching out like grasping claws. And as they entered the woods, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap that had been set not by the Circle of Unease, but by something or someone much closer to home. The image of Rylan's altered reflection was still so vivid, a seed of unease planted deep in her heart. Chapter 18. The Heart's Reckoning. The whispering woods lived up to its name. The wind rustled through the leaves, creating a constant murmur, a chorus of voices that seemed to whisper secrets, warnings, and prophecies all at once. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and shifted with every gust of wind. Lyra and Rylan moved cautiously through the woods, their senses on high alert, their hands clasped together, their bond a source of strength and reassurance in the face of the unknown. Lyra kept replaying the vision in the mirror, the distorted image of Rylan, his eyes filled with a darkness she had never seen before. It was a chilling premonition, a seed of doubt that had been planted in her heart, threatening to blossom into full-blown fear. She tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light, a manifestation of her stress and anxiety, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more, something significant, something that she needed to understand. Rylan, she said, her voice hesitant, her eyes searching his. Do you ever feel different? Like there's something else inside you? Something dark? Rylan looked at her, his golden eyes clouding with a mixture of pain and understanding. He knew what she was referring to, the legacy of his ancestor, the darkness that he carried within him. Yes, Lyra, he admitted, his voice low and heavy. I do. I always have. It's the curse of my bloodline, the shadow of Kaelin that hangs over me. He stopped, his gaze locking with hers, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow, a vulnerability that tore at Lyra's heart. I fight it, Lyra, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Every day, I fight it. I fight the urge to succumb to the darkness, to embrace the power that is my birthright, but at a terrible cost. Lyra reached out and gently cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the lines of his jaw, her eyes filled with love and compassion. I know you do, Rylan, she said, her voice soft, yet firm. And I believe in you. I trust you. With all my heart. Rylan leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a moment, as if drawing strength from her love, from her unwavering faith in him. Thank you, Lyra, he whispered. You have no idea how much that means to me. They continued their journey, their steps more determined now, their bond strengthened by the shared vulnerability, by the open and honest conversation. They reached the ancient oak tree, the one Maeve had described in her letter, the place where the first Hollowfang had made their pact with the land. The tree was massive, its trunk wider than a car, its branches reaching towards the sky like gnarled, twisted arms. The air around the tree was thick with power, a palpable energy that made Lyra's skin tingle. She could feel the presence of her ancestors, their spirits lingering in this sacred place, watching over her, guiding her. They searched the tree, their fingers tracing the rough bark, looking for the mark of the 3 claws. And then Lyra found it. Hidden beneath a thick layer of moss, carved into the trunk of the tree, was the unmistakable symbol, 3 deep gashes that looked as if they had been made by a giant wolf. This is it, Lyra said, her voice filled with excitement and anticipation. This is where the fragment is hidden. Rylan nodded, his golden eyes scanning the area, alert for any sign of danger. But how do we get to it? He asked. There's no obvious opening, no hidden passage. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her mind, reaching out with her senses, connecting to the ancient magic of the Hollowfang. She felt a pull, a subtle vibration, coming from the ground beneath the tree. It's underneath, she said, her voice filled with awe. The fragment is buried beneath the roots of the tree. Rylan looked at her, his expression skeptical. But how do we get to it? He asked. We can't just dig up the tree. Lyra smiled, her eyes sparkling with a newfound confidence. We don't have to, she said. We have the magic. She placed her hands on the trunk of the tree, her fingers splayed, her palms pressing against the rough bark. She closed her eyes again, drawing upon the power of the Hollowfang, channeling it through her body, into the tree, into the ground beneath. She spoke in the ancient language, the language of her ancestors, the language of the shapeshifters, the language of the land. The words flowed from her lips, effortlessly, instinctively, as if she had known them all her life. The ground beneath the tree began to tremble. The roots shifted and groaned, and a small opening appeared, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading down into the earth. Lyra opened her eyes, her face flushed with excitement. It worked, she whispered. We did it. Rylan looked at her, his golden eyes filled with admiration and love. You are amazing, Lyra, he said, his voice filled with awe. They entered the passage, hand in hand, descending into the darkness, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The air grew colder, damper, and the scent of earth intensified. They reached a small, underground chamber, and there, in the center, resting on a bed of moss, was the fragment. A smooth stone pulsing a deep, emerald green. But as Lyra moved to pick it up, she heard that soft, familiar whisper once more. Lyra, but this time, it came from behind her. Rylan was at the entrance, facing outward. She whipped around, expecting to see what? Alaric? One of his followers? But it was him, Rylan. His eyes, however, were not the familiar, loving gold. They were the dark, empty, corrupted hue she had witnessed in the mirror. Chapter 19. Where Shadows Converge. The sight of Rylan, his eyes devoid of their usual warmth, replaced by a chilling, empty darkness, sent a wave of ice-cold terror through Lyra. It was the vision from the mirror, come to life, a nightmare made real. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat, her mind struggling to reconcile the man she loved with the monstrous image before her. "Rylan?" she whispered, her voice trembling, her hand reaching out towards him, hesitant, fearful. The figure that resembled Rylan smiled, a cold, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. "Hello, Lyra," he said, his voice distorted, a chilling mockery of Rylan's usual warm, resonant tone. "Did you miss me?" Lyra staggered back, her mind reeling, her heart breaking. This wasn't Rylan. This was something else. Something dark, something malevolent, something that had taken possession of the man she loved. "What have you done with him?" she cried, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. "What have you done with Rylan?" The figure laughed, a chilling, mocking sound that echoed through the small chamber. "Rylan?"
He scoffed.
"He's indisposed. Let's just say he's resting." He took a step closer, his dark eyes fixed on Lyra, their intensity burning into her soul. "But don't worry, my dear," he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm here now, and I'm so much stronger." Lyra knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was the darkness Rylan had always feared, the legacy of his ancestor, the curse that had finally caught up with him. But how? Why now? What had triggered this transformation? She remembered the words of Maeve's letter. "They will use any means necessary, even those you love." The circle of unease. They had done this. They had somehow managed to corrupt Rylan, to turn him into a weapon against her.
But how could that be?
He was down here, guarding the entrance. He wasn't with the circle. You are Kaelin," she stated to the figure. Not a question, but a horrible, frightening statement of fact. The creature before her grinned, a sharp showing of teeth. A part, a sliver, you may say, awakened and called. "The boy has been fighting it all his life. Very tiresome of him."
"Where is
Rylan?" Lyra demanded, her voice stronger this time. Kaelin in Rylan's body laughed again. "He is here, my dear."
"Trapped."
"Just as you soon will be." He raised his hand, and the air around him crackled with dark energy. Lyra knew she had to act fast. She had to fight, not just for herself, but for Rylan, for the man she loved, for the hope of freeing him from this monstrous possession. She reached for the fragment, her fingers closing around the smooth, cool stone. As she touched it, a surge of power flowed through her, a wave of ancient magic that strengthened her resolve, that gave her the courage to face the darkness before her. She raised her other hand, focusing her will, channeling the power of the Hollowfang, preparing to unleash a blast of energy at the figure that had once been Rylan. But before she could act, the figure lunged forward, his movements incredibly fast, faster than anything she had ever seen from Rylan. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a vice, preventing her from using her magic. "You are strong, Lyra," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "But you are not strong enough. You cannot defeat me. You cannot defeat the darkness that flows through my veins." He squeezed her wrist, and Lyra cried out in pain. The fragment slipped from her grasp, falling to the ground with a soft thud. The figure smiled, a triumphant, cruel smile that made Lyra's blood run cold. "Now," he said, "you will join your beloved Rylan. In the darkness. Forever." He raised his other hand, his fingers glowing with a dark, malevolent energy, preparing to strike the final blow. But suddenly, a voice, Rylan's true voice, weak but clear, came from behind the figure. "Lyra, the ring." Lyra acted on instinct, driving the heel of her hand into the arm holding hers, using the leverage of the ring to strike. The silver, imbued with all her magic, reacted violently to the dark magic holding Rylan, an explosion of golden light. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. The explosion of golden light through the Kaelin possessed Rylan back, his grip on Lyra's wrist broken. He screamed, a mixture of pain and rage, as the ancient magic of the Hollowfang, channeled through the ring, repelled the darkness that had consumed him. Lyra stumbled back, her wrist throbbing, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at her hand, at the ring, its silver now glowing with an even brighter, more intense light. It was a weapon, a shield, a connection to the very essence of her power. The figure that had been Rylan writhed on the ground, his body convulsing, the darkness within him battling against the light that had struck him. It was a gruesome sight, a terrifying spectacle, but Lyra couldn't look away. She had to see this through. She had to save Rylan. She had to defeat the darkness that threatened to consume him. She rushed to the fallen fragment, scooping it up, her fingers closing around its smooth, cool surface. She felt its power surge through her, strengthening her resolve, giving her the courage to face the final confrontation. She turned back to the struggling figure, her eyes filled with determination and love. "Rylan!" she cried, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Fight it, Rylan. Fight the darkness. I know you're in there. I believe in you." Her words seemed to penetrate the darkness, to reach the trapped consciousness of the man she loved. The figure's convulsions lessened, his screams fading, his body becoming less monstrous, more human. The dark eyes flickered, and for a moment, Lyra saw a flash of gold, a glimpse of the Rylan she knew and loved. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. It was a sign that he was still there, that he was fighting, that he was trying to break free. Lyra raised the fragment, holding it high, channeling all her power, all her love, all her hope into it. She spoke again in the ancient language, the words flowing from her lips with a force and clarity she had never known before. The chamber filled with light, a blinding, golden light that emanated from the fragment, from the ring, from Lyra herself. It was the light of the Hollowfang, the light of ancient magic, the light of love and hope, the light that could banish the darkness forever. The figure that had been Rylan screamed again, a long, agonizing scream that echoed through the chamber, a scream of defeat, of surrender, of release. The darkness that had consumed him erupted from his body, a swirling vortex of shadows that dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind only the man, Rylan, lying weak and vulnerable on the ground. Lyra rushed to his side, dropping the fragment, her hands reaching out to him, her heart overflowing with relief and love. "Rylan!" she cried, her voice choked with emotion. "Rylan, are you all right?" Rylan stirred, his eyes slowly opening, their golden glow returning, their warmth and love shining through. He looked at Lyra, his gaze confused, disoriented, but filled with a profound sense of peace. "Lyra?" he whispered, his voice weak, hoarse. What happened?" Lyra gently cradled his head in her lap, her tears falling onto his face, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. "It's all right, Rylan," she said, her voice soothing, calming. "It's over. You're safe now. You're free." Rylan struggled to sit up, his body aching, his mind still reeling from the ordeal. He looked around the chamber, at the fallen fragment, at the remnants of the darkness that had consumed him, and he remembered. He remembered the battle, the possession, the agonizing struggle to break free. He looked back at Lyra, his golden eyes filled with shame and regret. I almost, he stammered, unable to finish the sentence, the horror of what had almost happened overwhelming him. Lyra silenced him, with a gentle finger to his lips. "Shush," she said. "It wasn't you, Rylan. It was the darkness, the curse. It wasn't your fault." She helped him to his feet, her arms supporting him, her love a tangible force that gave him strength. They stood together, embracing, their hearts beating as one, their bond stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of darkness, tempered by the fires of love. They picked up the fragment, its emerald glow a symbol of their victory, a reminder of the power they held, the responsibility they carried. They left the underground chamber, hand in hand, ascending into the light, leaving the shadows behind them forever. They had faced their greatest fear, They had conquered the darkness within and without, and they had emerged victorious, their love a beacon of hope for the future of the Hollowfang, for the future of Black Hollow, for the future of the world. They still had work to do, the final fragment was still hidden, but now, nothing could stand between them. Epilogue. The final fragment, nestled within the heart of the old mill on the outskirts of Black Hollow, had been the easiest to find. It was as if the universe, having tested Lyra and Rylan to their limits, had finally relented, offering a moment of respite, a chance to breathe, to heal, to prepare for the final act of their shared destiny. With all 3 fragments in their possession, they returned to the ruins, to the circular chamber where it had all begun, where the ancient pact had been broken, where the curse had been unleashed. The blood moon was long gone, replaced by the gentle light of a new dawn, a dawn that symbolized hope, renewal, and the promise of a brighter future. They placed the fragments on the altar, the 3 stones, one crimson, one emerald, one a deep, sapphire blue, aligning perfectly, fitting together as if they had never been separated. As the final piece clicked into place, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber, a wave of ancient magic that washed over Lyra and Rylan, cleansing them, strengthening them, uniting them in a bond that was unbreakable, eternal. The altar glowed with a brilliant, golden light, and the carvings on its surface seemed to come alive, the wolves howling, the vines intertwining, the blood drops shimmering, no longer corrupted, but pure, vibrant, filled with the life force of the land. The broken bond was healed. The curse was lifted. The Hollowfang was whole again. Lyra and Rylan stood hand in hand, their eyes filled with tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. They had done it. They had fulfilled the prophecy. They had reclaimed their legacy. They had saved their people, and they had found their forever in each other's arms. The years that followed were filled with peace, with prosperity, with a renewed sense of purpose for the Hollowfang. Lyra and Rylan, together, led their people, guiding them, protecting them, teaching them to live in harmony with nature, to embrace their gifts, to use their powers for good. Black Hollow flourished, no longer a town shrouded in secrets and shadows, but a vibrant community, a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of love, of courage, of resilience. The whispers had returned, but they were no longer the voices of fear, of malice, of threat. They were the voices of the ancestors, the voices of the land, the voices of the Hollowfang, singing a song of unity, of strength, of enduring love. Lyra and Rylan, hand in hand, watching a sunset from atop a mountain peak, were no longer plagued by fractured reflections or inherited darkness. They were simply Lyra and Rylan, 2 souls intertwined, their love a beacon, a testament to their shared journey, their unbreakable bond, and the enduring power of their hearts. The wind whispered around them, and they knew. The Hollowfang and